Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. Slaughterhouse 5. By Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut's novel Slaughterhouse 5, The Children's Crusade, A Duty Dance with Death was published in 1969. It is a semi-autobiographical account of the World War II firebombing of Dresden. The story begins with the voice of Kurt Vonnegut and progresses to the main character, Billy Pilgrim. Vonnegut had been a POW when he was only 20 years old. He was taken to Dresden, the capital of the German state of Saxony, for forced labor and hunger. The story shifts to Billy Pilgrim in the second chapter, with Vonnegut playing a small role. Billy was also captured as a prisoner following the Battle of the Bulge. He was transferred to Dresden by train, which was attacked by Allied forces, and imprisoned in Dresden, which was firebombed by Allied forces. The irony is that Billy was nearly murdered twice by friendly fire rather than Germans. Billy is a time traveler who flits from one incident to the next in the novel. However, every time he returns to an incident, time becomes linear. Billy is abducted by an alien race known as the Tralfamadores and placed in a zoo, where he is assigned a young woman as a mate. However, because he jumps in time, he could be there 1 minute and then in a POW camp the next, or in his life as an ophthalmologist with his wife and children the next. Or, perhaps, his brain injuries from a plane crash, his post-traumatic stress disorder from his time as a POW, and other things that could cause psychological trauma affected his mind, and the entire story Billy relates is the consequence of delusions. Slaughterhouse 5 is written in Kurt Vonnegut's voice. His intention with the book is to write about the World War II firebombing of Dresden, Germany. The Guggenheim Foundation financed a journey for him and Bernard V. O'Hare to the Dresden slaughterhouse, where they were imprisoned during World War II, in 1967. Along the way, the two men struck up a conversation with the taxi driver, a communist called Gerhard Müller, to whom he dedicated Slaughterhouse 5, along with Mary, Bernard V. O'Hare's wife. Müller later sends a Christmas letter to O'Hare with his best wishes for world peace. Vonnegut has frequently attempted to write about his experiences during the war, but has been unable to do it. He tries to create an outline on a piece of wallpaper, but it still doesn't work. His anti-war position just adds to the difficulty. And writing about war with the intention of putting an end to it is akin to writing about glaciers with the intention of halting their melting. In the years following the war, Vonnegut worked as an anthropology student at the University of Chicago, as a police reporter, and in public relations for General Electric in New York. But he kept researching for the Dresden novel he planned to write. When he contacted the U.S. Air Force, he discovered that it was still classified. Vonnegut visited Bernard O'Hare about 1964, when he met Mary, who made him promise not to depict them all as heroes, pointing out that they were all babies at the time. She instead informed him about the Children's Crusade. His research led him to a previous bombardment in Dresden in 1760. Vonnegut was teaching at a writer's workshop in Iowa when he earned a 3-book deal. Slaughterhouse 5 was the first novel. The novel is muddled because there is nothing intelligent to say about a slaughter. Vonnegut sleeps in a motel on his route to Dresden to study his book, where he loses track of time and examines the Bible's narrative of Sodom and Gomorrah. He compares himself to Lot's wife, gazing back and becoming a salt pillar. The narrative turns to Billy Pilgrim's story in Chapter 2. We go at random through his life, beginning with a brief overview. Billy was born in Ilium, New York in 1922. He was little and frail as a child. Billy began his education as an optician after graduating from high school. He was then drafted into the army. Billy suffers a psychological breakdown following his service in Germany. Electric shock therapy was used as a treatment. Billy marries, has 2 children, and becomes a rich optometrist after his recovery. Billy survives a plane crash in Vermont in 1968, and while he is recovering, his wife is killed in an accident. When Billy returns to New York, he goes on a radio station to talk about his alien abduction in 1967. His daughter discovers his rantings and brings him home, concerned about his mental health. His next step will be to write a letter to the local newspaper about the aliens. When the article is published, Billy is writing a letter describing his adventures on Tralfamadore. He believes that revealing the secrets of time will bring people comfort. When his 21-year-old daughter arrives with questions about the story, she attempts to engage him in conversation. She's concerned about her father. Billy begins by recounting his service in the army. In South Carolina, he was studying to become an assistant to the chaplain. He encountered 3 soldiers there. Roland Weary, one of them, saved his life a few times in the hopes of getting an accommodation. Billy's time shifts for the first time while out walking with these men. He stops to rest beside a tree and then transforms into a small boy being thrown into the pool by his father. Swimming lessons that are sink or swim. Then he flies back in time to 1965 to visit his mother in a nursing facility. Then he's at a Little League banquet for his son in 1958. Then he wakes up in 1961, drunk and cheating on his wife. After falling asleep, he is awakened by Roland's shaking and finds himself back inside enemy lines. Two scouts abandon Billy and Roland, and while Roland complains about always being left behind, Billy time travels back to 1957, when he is giving a speech as the newly elected president of the Ilium Lions Club. Then he's back in Germany, being apprehended alongside Roland. The two men are led to a residence full of inmates. Billy falls asleep and awakens in the middle of an eye exam in his optometrist's office. He discovers that he has been sleeping at work. He is a prisoner again when he closes his eyes, and he is being jerked awake for transport. He is used by a German photographer to stage a photograph of him surrendering to the Germans. He finds himself in 1967, exiting the banquet. His son is in Vietnam, and his daughter is marrying. He is a wealthy individual. Billy returns to his luxury home and falls asleep in his fancy bed, sobbing. He awakens in Germany, marching among other POWs. He notices Roland standing in front of him. Roland's feet are bloodied from having to surrender his boots for a German's clogs. Boxcars are laden with them. Because the room is limited, they alternate between sleeping and standing. They pass around a helmet in exchange for a chamber pot. The train begins to move after 2 days. Billy is taken to the night he is captured by the Tralfamadorians when he shuts his eyes. Billy is waiting for the spaceship that he knows is coming after him on the night of his daughter's wedding. He settles in front of the television to watch a World War II documentary. A slight shift in time causes him to see things backward. Then he goes out into the garden to await the arrival of the spaceship. He returns to the boxcar while still on the ship. By the end of the day, 9 people have died, including Roland, who informs everyone around him that Billy is to blame. Car thief Paul Lazzaro of Cicero, Illinois, promises to make Billy pay. On the 10th night, the boxcar arrives at the POW camp. While Billy and the other convicts are being deloused in the shower, Billy is whisked back in time to when he was a child and his mother had just bathed him, and then to a middle-aged man on the golf course. Then he's on the spaceship, where the Tralfamadors inform him that he's an ember and that time exists in 4 dimensions. They can see the past, future, and present all at once. They tell him that the only planet with free will is Earth. Billy is kept in a zoo on the ship. Billy flashes back to his boyhood, then finds himself back in the POW camp. The names of the convicts are all recorded in a ledger. The Americans are grouped with the British troops. Billy begins to giggle excessively during a play and is rushed to the hospital, where he is given a shot and subsequently wakes up in a veteran's mental ward. Billy checked himself in during his final year of optometry school. While there, he met Elliot Rosewater, who introduced him to novels by a Kilgore Trout. The books were clever science fiction, but poorly written. Billy pulls the blanket over his head and wakes up in Germany when his mother arrives to visit. Edgar Derby stands guard over Billy's sickbed. He recalls Derby dying in front of a firing squad a few days later. He then awakens in the Veterans Hospital. Valencia, his fiancée, comes to visit, and they talk about the book, Trout with Rosewater. Next, Billy has returned to his zoo enclosure aboard the ship. It's like having a furnished living room. The Tralfamadors talk to him about their race and how their planet operates. After he compliments them on their idyllic existence, they correct him by explaining that they do have war on occasion, and one of their pilots will accidentally kill the universe. Billy's next leap takes him to his wedding night. Valencia questions him about the conflict, and he jumps back to his medical bed in the prison camp. When he goes to use the restroom, he discovers another soldier vomiting. Vonnegut is the author. Paul Lazzaro arrives to the infirmary the next morning. He collapsed after attempting to steal from an Englishman. Billy awakens in 1968 after falling asleep. His daughter is chastising him for allowing the fire in the grate to die, and he is drafting a letter describing his adventures aboard the spaceship. He awakens on the spaceship after his daughter has put him to bed. A terrified woman is being thrown into his enclosure by the Tralfamadorians. Montana Wildhack is a well-known American actress. She will be Billy's companion. She grows to enjoy him after some time together, and they begin to sleep together. Billy awakens the next day in 1968. He examines the eyes of a young child whose father died in Vietnam and imparts some of what he has learned from the Tralfamadorians. Billy's mother abandons him because she believes he is nuts. They summoned his daughter to drive him home. Billy awakens in the prison camp. This is the day they will be taken to Dresden. He has 2 lumps of stuff in his coat that he knows not to notice. They will be useful later. Edgar Derby and Paul Lazzaro are there the next time he wakes up. The English are digging a new toilet, while the Americans will use the old one. After the war, Paul promises to kill the Englishman who beat him up. Then he tells Billy that he told Roland that he would murder Billy and urges him to be cautious when opening his door after the war. Billy already knows Paul will follow through on his threat. He has already died and knows that Paul shoots him with a sniper's bullet after delivering a speech about time travel. He also knows that China dropped a hydrogen bomb on Chicago in 1976, and that America is divided into 20 nations and hence cannot threaten war. He taped these occurrences and stored the tape in a safe deposit box. When the captives arrive in Dresden, Billy is clad in rags and resembles a clown. When Vonnegut gets off the train, he refers to the city as Oz. 100 captives are guarded by 8 troops. Billy and his companions are escorted to the slaughterhouse, which will serve as their headquarters. Billy is boarding an aircraft 25 years later. Valencia is bidding farewell. Valencia's father is among the optometrists on board. Billy is certain that the plane will crash. The Tralfamadorians inform him that all humans and animals are machines. The plane crashes on Vermont's Sugar Bush Mountain. Billy suffers from a fractured head and is rescued by some skiers. He is operated on by a well-known neurosurgeon and is rendered comatose for 2 days. He dreams during that time. Then he is in Dresden. PAs are assigned mundane tasks. Billy is employed in a syrup plant. The syrup is intended to enhance pregnant women's nutrition. Billy and some of the men sneak spoonfuls with spoons hidden throughout the work area during the day. Billy's body shivers when he eats it because he is so hungry. Derby erupts into tears of excitement as he passes a spoonful out the window. They enter a meat locker after hearing an air raid siren. But Billy is aware that the firebombing will not occur until the following night. He falls asleep in the meat locker and awakens to his daughter's annoyance. She holds Kilgore Trout responsible for Billy's mention of spaceships. Billy recalls first meeting Trout. In Ilium, the man oversaw newspaper boys and was amazed Billy had read any of his works. Trout was a success with the optometrists at Billy's 18th wedding anniversary party. Billy goes upstairs to use the restroom and comes across his kid playing the guitar. Then he goes to bed and thinks about the firebombing. The Americans, along with 4 German guards, take refuge in the meat locker. When they emerge from the onslaught, they are all taken aback by the devastation. Billy is now on the spaceship. Montana, who is 6 months pregnant, requests that he tell her a story. He tells her about the Dresden firebombing and the flaming logs, which were actually people. The party is wandering around in search of food and shelter. They discover an inn in a neighborhood that has not been damaged. The innkeeper, who is blind, provides them with soup and a bed. "Good night, Americans," he says in German. "Sleep well." After the plane catastrophe, Valencia drives to the hospital. She experiences a minor accident, unaware that she has wrecked her automobile, and dies from carbon monoxide poisoning in the hospital parking lot. Meanwhile, Billy experiences time travel and awakens in a hospital bed. He wishes to inform everyone about the Tralfamadorians, but no one would listen since they believe he has harmed his head. Then, in the bed next to him, a man is conducting research for a history of the United States Army Air Corps during World War II. He believes the Dresden firebombing was a successful strategy. When Billy tries to inform him he was there, he refuses to listen. Billy then travels to Dresden just 2 days before the war ends. The Germans are getting ready to evacuate because the Russians are on their way. Then he's back in the hospital bed, next to the man who's recording the history and asking Dresden questions. Billy is taken home by his daughter, where he will be cared for by a nurse. He can't wait to tell everyone about the Tralfamadorians and sneaks out to a New York radio station. When Billy arrives in town, he discovers 4 of Trout's books in a pornographic store's storefront. He walks in and notices that one of the novels is about a man and woman who are kidnapped by aliens and confined in a zoo-like enclosure. Then he notices a headline in a pornographic magazine asking what became of Montana Wildhack. He watches a few minutes of a film featuring a young Montana. Because there is a radio station near the hotel where Billy is staying, he joins a group of reporters discussing the situation of the novel. When it comes his turn to talk, Billy tells them about the Tralfamadors and Montana Wildhack. They believe he is insane and accompany him out of the building. Then he's back on the ship, and Montana is breastfeeding their child. She informs him she knows he's been time traveling again, and he notices she's wearing a Serenity prayer necklace, precisely like the plaque he had in his optometrist's office. The year has changed to 1968. Billy recalls the Tralfamadorians being more interested in Darwin than in Jesus. They were fans of Darwin's theories. Billy discovers one of Trout's writings about aliens who wanted to discuss Darwin and golf. Vonnegut addresses the reader here, saying that he would be disappointed if Billy only learned about eternal existence from the Tralfamadorians. Vonnegut, on the other hand, is grateful for the positive times in his life, such as returning to America with O'Hare and eating salami sandwiches on a plane. It is 2 days after the attack that Billy returns to Dresden. He, Vonnegut, and O'Hare are all looking for bodies. One of the pals vomits himself to death. When it becomes clear that the remains cannot be buried before rotting, the Germans order that they be burned using flamethrowers. Derby is apprehended with a teapot he found in the rubble and is sentenced to death by firing squad. As spring approaches, the Germans leave to battle or flee the Russians. Billy discovers the cart shaped like a coffin and horse that will convey them from Dresden. He notices a bird cry. Billy Pilgrim is the book's primary character. During World War II, he was imprisoned in Dresden, Germany. He became a respected ophthalmologist after the war until he was abducted by the Tralfamadorians on a spaceship. He evolved into a time traveler. He was time-stuck and jumped from major event to significant event in his life. He would experience moments of time with each jump, then return after other stops to experience the following moment. Kurt Vonnegut is the story's author and a minor character. His presence added realism to the story because he was a prisoner of war in Dresden during the World War II firebombing. By incorporating himself into the plot, he either makes Billy's claim of time and space travel plausible or the dreams of a guy suffering from brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder. Bernard V. O'Hare, Vonnegut's wartime friend. He is a real individual who assists him in writing about their experiences during the firebombing in Dresden. Mary O'Hare, Bernard's wife. Vonnegut is warned not to romanticize the firebombing in his book. But first, let's talk about how horrible war is. Because he agrees, he dedicates the work to her. Gerhard Müller, the German cab driver who Vonnegut and O'Hare meet while exploring Dresden and researching the novel. He sends Christmas cards to O'Hare with messages of peace. Vonnegut is so impressed by this gesture that he dedicates a chapter to him in his book. Roland Weary, captured at the same time Billy is. Despite his desire to be a celebrated hero, he dies of gangrene caused by sores from the shoes he is compelled to wear after a German soldier trades his clogs for Roland's army boots. Paul Lazzaro, a car thief who ends up as a prisoner of war with Roland. When Roland dies, he commands Paul to exact vengeance on Billy, whom he holds responsible for his death. Many years later, Paul shoots and kills Billy, fulfilling his pledge. Edgar Derby, another POW who escaped the firebombing only to be executed by firing squad for stealing a teapot from the wreckage of the attack. Valencia Merble, Billy's wife. She adores him and provides a welcoming environment for him and their 2 children. However, he is distant and spends little time with her. She dies peacefully, but tragically and alone, in the hospital parking lot where she had rushed to be near her husband. He is physically present in the building, yet he is going through time. Tralfamadorians, aliens shaped like toilet plungers. They only have one eye, which is in their palm. They take Billy and place him in a zoo enclosure. Billy strives to live his life according to their life philosophies, and he travels the world giving talks on the subjects. They perceive time as a series of simultaneous events. Elliot Rosewater, an Army veteran who is in the bed next to Billy at the Veterans Administration Hospital. Elliot is also dealing with PTSD. He assists Billy in finding refuge in Kilgore Trout's wonderful stories. Kilgore Trout, a bitter unappreciated writer of fantastical science fiction. His writing is horrible, despite the fact that his stories are inventive. He is a character who appears and represents Vonnegut in other books. Montana Wildhack, a young actress that is captured by the Tralfamadorians and given to Billy as his mate. He wins her trust, and she bears his kid. However, she could be a fiction of his imagination, fueled by the magazine and video he saw in a pornographic shop. Kurt Vonnegut, 1922–2007, was born in Indianapolis, Indiana on November 11, 1922. He was the son of German immigrants who arrived in Indiana in the mid-19th century. During World War II, Vonnegut dropped out of college to join the army. He was transported to Germany, where he was taken as a prisoner of war and transferred to Dresden. He survived Dresden's firebombing and wrote about it in his book, Slaughterhouse 5. Vonnegut's parents disliked Germany so much that they never taught him the language or maintained any German books in the house. Vonnegut enjoyed writing for his high school newspaper. He believed that everyone had an inherent talent and questioned why some found it difficult. It was writing for him. He worked at the Cornell Daily Sun while at Cornell. He soon advanced through the ranks to become the editor. Kurt, as a pacifist, was opposed to the war. However, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the entire country was prepared to battle. Kurt was a member of the Reserve Officers Training Corps while in college, but poor grades and a satirical piece landed him on academic probation. Vonnegut dropped out of college, lost his student deferment, and enlisted rather than waiting to be drafted. He was stationed in Indiana, near enough to home to sleep and report for duty the next morning. Kurt returned for Mother's Day weekend and discovered his mother's body. She had overdosed on sleeping pills and committed suicide. 3 months later, he was assigned to the 106th. Due to their inexperience, his battalion was meant to be in a safe zone during the Battle of the Bulge. That didn't work either. They were routed by German soldiers. 500 people were slain, and 6,000 were apprehended. The train carrying the convicts was assaulted by Englishmen, who killed 150 of the passengers. Vonnegut was then transported to Dresden with other inmates and subjected to rigorous work. Thousands of people were killed when Allied forces attacked the city while they were there. Vonnegut spent the rest of his time in the United States after being transferred to a repatriation camp in France. In 1945, he was discharged. In September of 1945, he married Jane Marie Cox. He had known her since kindergarten and she was his high school girlfriend. On the GI Bill, Vonnegut studied anthropology at the University of Chicago and worked at the Chicago City News Bureau at night. He penned a few pieces and sold them to periodicals. He dropped out after his thesis was rejected by the college, and his wife left when she became pregnant. Vonnegut afterwards worked at GE and continued to write. Soon after, his writing became profitable enough for him to quit his work and relocate his family to Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where he settled to write. His easygoing demeanor and novel subject matter earned him a large following. He wrote a couple works that didn't sell well before Slaughterhouse 5, but that book came at the appropriate time during the Vietnam War. It was favorably received for its anti-war stance. It quickly rose to the top of the bestseller list and became well known. He was asked to give lectures, speeches, and commencement addresses. Kurt has also received various writing honors. Kurt Vonnegut's writing style was typically science fiction. He wrote a lot of gallows humor and was satirical. He wrote 14 novels, 3 short story collections, 5 plays, and 5 non-fiction publications during his lifetime. Kurt Vonnegut died at the age of 84 due to complications from a fall in his New York townhouse. But his genius will go on in perpetuity. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.